Today I'm going to draw a hot air balloon landscape using watercolors. I'm going to begin by using tracers in different sizes, and I'm drawing very lightly. And I want to create an interesting composition here. The objective here is to teach kids about atmospheric perspective, to have them think about the fact that hot air balloons that are further away in the distance are going to look smaller, and hot air balloons that are closer are going to look larger. So I have here some examples for them to look at. Of course, the balloon is not perfectly round, but the tracer helps us establish the general shape. Then we're going to pull down the edges. The foreground one that's bigger obviously would have a lot more detail. Although even here I'm keeping the basket quite simple. Now for the landscape. I need to figure out what kind of landscape I want. I want students to think about having a bit of a foreground and a middle ground as well in their landscape. So I'm just going to draw in, here's my foreground. Maybe sort of indicating a little bit some foliage, some trees far away in the distance. And then back here maybe there's a mountain range. Mountain ranges are layered. To ensure that the balloon looks three-dimensional, you want to create a curvature. So regardless of what your pattern is, you want these lines to follow the shape of the balloon. The other thing, you want to create a bit of volume up here because this is, it's quite pumped up. It's a balloon, so you want to bring out these edges. It's going to make it look more balloony and less like you just traced a template. Remember, the more curvature you create every step of the way, the more rounded and balloony all of your air balloons will look. Maybe I do want to create a little bit of a chevron pattern. These are my watercolors. I like to use an uncleaned palette. I find that the dirty watercolors are the nicest, so I don't often clean out my palette. I'm going to start with my sky. Now, watercolors are a little tricky to use. The key to watercolor is to always start light to dark. I'm going to use this brush. This is a flat brush just for my background. I'm going to do my background first. You always want to start back to front, and you want to start light to dark. Again, I'm keeping things quite loose. My air balloons are going to be quite colorful, so I want my background to be a lot softer. This is another tip for atmospheric perspective. We know that if you look at this photograph, the balloon in the front is quite bold. It's very bright. The hues are very strong. The further back you go, the balloons start looking a bit softer, less detailed, and of course the sky is also very soft, and the foreground here in the front is much bolder. So that's atmospheric perspective as well. Things in the distance look softer and lighter than things in the foreground. I like to do wet on wet for backgrounds in watercolor. It helps colors flow, and you end up with often some unexpected, really beautiful results. You want to carefully go around your features here. Good enough. Now you need to work a little quickly here because you don't want your paper to dry. So I'm just going to dot in some colors here and there, and I want to move them around a little bit. For good color composition and balance, you really want to spread your colors around a little bit here, there, and everywhere. So if I'm using this color once, I want to make sure I'm using it again somewhere else in my composition. So now I might switch to a different blue. Atmospheric perspective also says that the bottom of your sky is going to be lighter than the top of your sky. So your painting should be a little bit darker at the top than at the bottom. And that's just because the light is interacting from the sun more strongly at the top. Things get much softer at the bottom. So I'm going to soften up as I come down. I might tap in a little purple just for fun. Why not? It helps to kind of darken up the top of my sky as well. I'm going to start at the top of my background and move down. So because this is a mountain range, again, I'm going to use blues. You can try to use a different kind of blue if you have a different kind of blue. I'm not doing wet on wet here, but I'm using a very wet brush and just a little bit of pigment. My mountains in the top are going to be lighter than my mountains in the bottom. Because, again, it's atmospheric perspective. They're further away. These might even be snow-capped, so before I go ahead and paint everything blue, I'm going to leave a little bit white. And I don't mind that my colors are mixing. I think it makes things look quite soft. Do you see how my second layer of blue interacted with my first? Again, I'm using the side of my brush here, and I'm just kind of going across in almost a horizontal way. And I'm getting a little bit darker every time I come down. I don't want things to look super crisp and blue. I want them to look a bit more neutral. I'm just going to mix my blue into one of my dirty palettes over here. I don't even know what is in here. Maybe some old greens and some blacks. You just create more of a natural color. This is why I like to have dirty palettes on hand at all times. I'm going to take another one of my dirty blue palettes. This one might have some browns and greens, I don't know. I'm just going to keep on coming down. I'm going to do my green foreground. I think that's kind of a grassy green foreground. Again, I'm going to use a dirty palette. This looks like it has lots of different greens, maybe some yellows, maybe some browns in it. And I'm going to come down here and just sweep across horizontally. I'm going to darken up some of the darker areas at the bottom just to give the picture some weight. I might also add a little bit of yellow in there to create a bit of warmth. Finding some dirty palette colors, and I'm going to very loosely kind of put in the tree line. I might find that this is going to be too light. I might go in and darken it later, but very jagged, very simple. It's an indication of trees. I'm not actually painting trees, I'm just painting sort of an indication of trees. Very impressionistic, I guess. I do find that it could be a little darker. I'm going to use a little black, but you got to be careful with the black. Black is very strong, so I'm going to mix in some green, some brown. I'm going to repeat this color a little bit. I quite like it. Just create some striations down here. I might even deepen some of the areas in the back here behind one mountain range. Kind of helps to emphasize the other mountain ranges a little bit. I'm going to go in there and soften that up with some water and just kind of blend it out a little bit. Actually, it looks much better now. One thing I can do to emphasize my mountain here a little bit is very gently creating a little bit more of a sky area around the back of it. That's going to help to emphasize that this snow-capped mountain. Of course, you want to blend that you want to soften it. But this helps to emphasize a little bit my mountain range. Over here I might darken this one a little bit, also to create more of a separation between sky and mountain. It's always good to have a reference photo. You know, it's pretty impossible to just create this out of your memory. So have some reference photos. I'm going to soften this edge here a little bit. Create a stronger horizon line there underneath my trees. For the hot air balloons, I'm going to use a couple of brushes, maybe these two. One is a small detail brush and the other is a flat edge. I think I'll go quite colorful on this. So since most of the other colors currently in my composition are cooler colors, I'm going to go quite bright and keep things a bit warm. You want to think about where your sun is coming from, where the light's coming from. Looks like on my mountain range, this side is darker and this side is lighter. So maybe I'll have the sun coming from here. I'm going to start by using just one color, and I'll use it throughout my composition. Because my light's coming from here, I'm going to try to go a little bit more intense on the left side of my balloon. That means I'm using more water and less pigment on the right side. I can always go back in and add a little more dark. It's so important to not overdo watercolor. So often I see my students scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing and painting and painting and painting with watercolor, when what they should be doing is just leaving it alone. Honestly, watercolor wants to be left alone. That's what makes it so beautiful too, is the fact that it blends and bleeds. For those of us who have a hard time letting go, we want to be in control of everything we draw and paint, myself included. It's not easy. But you'll see that once you learn to let go, your results will be so much better. Now, I'm not going to work directly here now or here because these edges are wet and I don't want my paint to flow and mix with my next layer of paint. So I'm going to skip a row and maybe start over here. Now maybe I'll start over here. Now I'm using kind of an ochre. I want to be careful not to touch the other areas that I've painted. So I'm actually leaving a little bit of space here. And because this is a big area and I don't want it to dry, I'm going to actually go ahead and just do one space at a time. I don't want my paint to dry on me. So I'm going to dilute this now and pull it over. Leave some white space there. The lighter you go, you know, from really dark to really light, the more dimension you create. Now for this area, I might just make it ochre, keep it kind of simple. I might add a bit of brown in for kind of a darker shadow area. And for my basket, we don't really see the detail. It's too far away. I might add a darker brown in there. So now I've got two different browns on here. I'm going to do this one slightly different pattern. Here I don't even mind if my colors blend a little bit. If they start bleeding together a little bit, it's going to create a softness which you kind of want that in these distant balloons. This last balloon, I want it to stand out against the sky, so I'll use some nice bright warm colors, yellow colors. I don't mind if they're bleeding together. These distant ones are very impressionistic, very just an impression of a balloon. I'm actually going to see if I can develop a little bit the shape here. I think that the shape on this one could actually be a little bit rounder. I can go in here with a pencil and I can develop again some of these pencil lines, some of the string hanging here. These distant ones, you probably wouldn't even see the string because it's too far away, but you can develop a little bit, maybe the edge of your basket, also with pencil. There's all kinds of detailing you can do with your graphite. As long as your paint is dry, you can go in here and develop a little bit of the contours here. This can help to darken some of the shadow areas. The last thing I might do is go back in here with a very dark color with a hint of black and maybe deepen some of the tree areas in the front. I feel like it just needs a slightly darker application. So if there's any other areas you want to address, I might be pulling up. Take a towel and a wet brush and I might pull up some of this color to create more light. And then again, you can use a little bit of pencil to help develop a little bit some of these areas. This is still very wet, so it's not going to be easy to use pencil over top, but you can go ahead and try. I think this one is going to look good, kind of bleeding. So I've just wet the area around it a little bit. This is going to create sort of an imposed softness. So I've sort of forced the softness on it by creating a situation where I'm making it bleed a little bit. It creates a bit of a softer effect. Maybe I can do that around here too, with a bit of this yellow. Why am I doing that? I don't know. I think it just creates an interesting blend with the sky. And because it's blending with the sky, it's softening the balloon. And it's allowing this one to be more crisp and in the foreground. So let's take off the tape now. And now this is washi tape. I had taped these borders down at the beginning. Do you see how I added a little purple up here? I quite like how that ended up looking because it's playing off of some of the other purple elsewhere in the composition. And likewise, I might add a little yellow in here to play off of this yellow. These are just little tricks to build in a little bit of harmony in your composition. Actually, I might do that a little bit down here too to help offset my mountain a bit better. You can see that my mountain is kind of vying for attention here against the sky. So this is a good trick to offset your mountain a little bit. and to repeat some of the colors that you have going elsewhere, which is always good for balance and harmony. Okay, so this is my hot air balloon in a landscape using watercolor in a very loose impressionistic style. Thanks for watching.